All right, we are taping this. It is 8:45 Pacific time, Tuesday night. We moved Russillo. He was supposed to be on Thursday and said, hey, Russillo, what if we do Tuesday night instead? Game 7, Clips Nuggets. Who knows? Maybe something will happen. Here's what happened. One of the great playoff chokes in the history of the NBA. And we're going to get to that in a second, but I want to start on a positive note. Nikola Jokic. We haven't had an impactful center in almost 20 years. I would say since 2002 Shaq. The third of his 3 finals MVP seasons, when he could still reach deep down and just destroy a team. And since then, we've had Dwight Howard, we've had Embiid, we've had cups of coffees with guys. Deep down, we knew they weren't great. And I think Jokic has a chance to be the first impactful guy we've had in 20 years. Before tonight's game, 27 playoff games, 26, 12, and 7, 51% field goal. Like, really nobody in the history of the league has done that for their whole career. And then today, even though Murray was the guy who scored all the points, Jokic had a triple-double in the third quarter. He just completely discombobulated the Clippers. And yeah, the Clippers fell short. And we can talk about all the terrible things they did in this series. But the bottom line is they didn't know what to do with Jokic. They didn't know how to defend him. They didn't have a plan for it. And even in game 7, as it's slipping away, they're doubling him. They're blitzing him. It's like they had no idea who he was. What was your reaction as you were watching this?
Well, we always talk about changing up coverages, right? And we do it. We talk about it in football all the time. And then we get really excited about it with Toronto and Nick Nurse. And then some of the stuff where Spoelstra even downplayed it in the Boston game where he's like, yeah, we had a few zone possessions, but we like this stuff, right? We like it. I think Jeff Van Gundy was incredibly Van Gundy in the cut, was very, very telling in where he's like, yeah, they just keep doubling him. They just keep doubling Jokic, and he's just throwing it to everybody. Now, again, when you're saying you're doubling the greatest passing big man of all time, which is what Van Gundy called him, and then it was Walton in the second quarter, and then by the time they had that run again, they were like, nope, it's Jokic. It's Jokic. It's not Walton anymore. I mean, they
stopped arguing about it.
Right. That's seriously like what kind of come up this series is for Jokic and his standing and where he is in this game, and that's what happens in the playoffs, and that's why it's so fun. But there's part of me that goes, eventually they did change it, though. They did change it where they put a big on him in the switch, but you're selling out and you're trying to double. And by the way, the Clippers are up 9 at one point here. Okay. They're up 9.
Third quarter. Yeah.
And then Paul George fouls out with gets his third foul at 5:15, although it may have been good on offense to not have him ever come back. And then Murray unleashes. But then on some of these double actions where there's times where I've watched Denver now so closely over the years, I go, I don't know, is that 2-man thing really going to work? Well, when Grant hits a couple threes and then Harris gets his first one and then Millsap hit that one at the top of the key when they doubled again, you're like, okay, well, this is different now because a lot of games, Grant's just out there to miss and not rebound. Harris can't shoot to save his life. I think there's probably a lot of people that forgot Millsap was on this team 3 times this year. But this whole series, man, I don't want to get too far in the weeds with it, but let's just talk at least for game 7. I think it's almost having to credit Jokic going, well, look, if this is what you're doing and you've given me all these options, I've already figured them all out now because it's 7 games of this stuff and I'm too good.
That's the key point.
Right.
You're challenging somebody who already has the answers to the test. You're saying like, hey, here's another multiple choice test. And he's like, I have the answer key right here. What are you doing? Yeah, it's A, C, B, D. Whatever you're doing, I'm ready. I already know how to handle this. He had 13 assists.
He had one catch. He had one catch in the paint where he was facing opposite to a guy at the elbow of the 3, and he got doubled, faked a pass to the opposite corner, and immediately turned around. Like, because these guys all know where everybody's supposed to be positioned. That's why when you see a guy throw it out of bounds, they'll point to him being like, you're off your spot. He already knew that he wasn't passing to the guy in the corner. It was passing it to somebody behind him. Exactly like you're saying, because now he's so comfortable and he's 7 feet getting doubled, just looking over everybody.
And if they do the double and then they back off it, he's smart enough to take his time and get the little foul line jumper or the runner or pretend he's going to have the foul line jumper and then hit somebody last second. He had 13 assists. What's crazy about it is Murray was 6 for 13 from 3. The rest of the team was 7 for 24. If they had hit more threes in this game, and if they credited when you have, you think those couple times where a guy got fouled because Jokic got him a layup and it didn't count as an assist for him, like he honestly could have had 20 plus assists in this game. If there's 2 layups where the layup actually goes in when the guy's getting fouled and then 4 other people hit a 3 or whatever, he's up there. I just thought he was so dominant. And it's weird because Murray had 40. Murray finally showed up, in both halves
Utah,
in a
right,
massive
his
playoff
second
Jamal
quarter,
Murray way.
His second quarter was nuts.
That's the guy that shouldn't, you would think like, all right, Jokic, if Zubats gets in foul trouble, which is what happened immediately in this game, well, all right, that's going to be trouble for the Clippers. Murray, they have 7 guys to throw at him, and he was torching them. And I felt like the spirit of the Clippers, you could see it fading as that second half went, which is the same thing that happened on Sunday in Game 6, right?
The whole point of the Clippers this whole time is you go, okay, look at all these options that they have when it's right, because when it's right, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And when they're up 3-1, you're like, okay, this is what's supposed to happen. And when they're up 19 in Game 6, you're like, okay, enough of this. And then you go, what the hell is wrong with these guys? You're like, okay, well now, whatever human nature there is, which I don't think we do enough of, where I always say, like, you can't fake being desperate. You can't be as desperate as the team that's down 2-0. Now, if they're terrible, if we're talking like a Nets or Magic first round series here, being down 2-0 is not going to help you. But if you're pretty good, and Denver's pretty good, there's just a different gear that they're going to have. But then when it gets to Game 7 tonight, Bill, and the Clippers get up, almost 10, and then they get up 7 early in the third quarter.
But did you think they were playing well, though? Because I didn't feel like they were playing that great.
I didn't think they were playing well, but I thought whenever they attacked and swung it, Denver's actually pretty bad on their rotations. And look, you don't have to believe me. Even Van Gundy's pointing it out. He's like, look, he started talking about that pistol screen that they were setting.
Yeah.
And, again, why Van Gundy's just better than everybody else that does it. I don't think there's another color commentary person nationally for basketball would start pointing out the pistol screen problems. And he had it immediately. It was like 2 plays. They ran it. He knew the action, and he was like, this is why it's messed up. And Denver was messing up some of their defensive rotations that Van Gundy's even pointing out. And I'm going, okay, the normal thing is going to happen here because of Kawhi. And yet then it gets back to something that we've talked about where it feels like we've had all these negative storylines with these teams because it's been so unproven. It's why do the Clippers why do they think so highly of themselves? Kawhi went and did that in Toronto last year. Kawhi did it without any of you guys. The rest of you guys haven't done anything. So why do you guys carry yourselves like this team that's like in year 3 after back-to-back titles? And that's kind of how they carried themselves with this group that never really clicked. Yet at the same time, I'm like, okay, how the hell did they ever get up 3-1? How did they get up 19 in Game 6? How did that team just look fucking petrified in the fourth quarter of a Game 7? Those are grown men that were scared to be playing basketball, and I give Kawhi a pass because I think he was trying to press the issue, and it just wasn't working. Like, he had an awful game, but other guys were scared, Bill.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I do think, Game 7 you saw in the first half, none of the Denver guys could hit a 3. And it had all the makings. It's like, oh, man, this is just going to have to be Murray and Jokic. And those 2 guys together kind of kept Denver hanging around until Denver started making some plays. But they were playing good defense, though. And I think, you think back to that Jeremy Grant trade where OKC's like, hey, we feel like saving money. Any interest in Jeremy Grant? Denver's like, sure. I thought he did a good job on Kawhi. And I don't know. We know Kawhi. I'm not going to say he, I'm like you. I hate using the word choke. I thought he looked tired. And this is something we had talked about heading into these playoffs where it's like the every other day. Was that going to favor younger teams? Was that going to hurt older guys? Was that going to hurt somebody like Kawhi, who's really been careful about how much mileage he wanted to put on himself the last couple of years? Now look at who we have in the Final Four. We have this young Celtics team. We have a Miami team that has a couple old guys, but for the most part, younger guys like Bam and Hero and people like that. And then this Denver team built around 2 young guys, and then the Lakers who haven't really been tested yet. But I do wonder, like, if you had home court and the schedule wasn't as kind of stacked as it was, would this have been the same result? We'll never know. But I think we have to mention it.
Well, it's certainly with Denver because when you look at their runs that they'll have, and then you'll kind of more so 2 years ago than this year, but you'd be like, well, wait a minute, what's the record on the road? And that was like more of me 2 years ago and talking about this team.
Yeah.
Where, even this year with Philly, I'm like, wait, this healthy team I'm supposed to take seriously, and you suck on the road, and then everything happens. So home and road doesn't really matter. But I think as much as I do want to get back to the Clippers thing, and I do want to get back to Kawhi, I almost want to
save that though, because I want to hit that in the next segment. I want to hit Nuggets and why they won first.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm doing. Like,
Yeah.
I want to give you more room here to just talk about Jokic and what is now like. This is the fun part. This is the great part about the playoffs. You have these kinds of performances, and now we have to look at you a lot differently now. Even though the numbers might be the same, even though look, his playoff regular season numbers, he's blowing up, but just to control the game the way he did. He didn't shoot it great tonight. He's also in that group of like, how come you don't shoot a little bit more? But he's so patient. He's dissecting every single thing. And once he gets rolling, and as we said at the very top, once he understands everything that you want to do, it's like Magic Johnson type stuff.
Well, what about when he takes the rebound and he goes and he's running 3-on-2 fast breaks? And that's where, when you're talking, I was lucky enough to see Walton at his peak. And then when he was on the Celtics, when he was a little rejuvenated,
not on his peak.
Never saw, but still like an incredible bench player.
Yeah.
Never saw Sabonis, saw like grainy YouTube of him, stuff like that. And then Jokic, and those are the three great passing centers of all time. I do feel like it was funny that Jackson mentioned Wilt Chamberlain as a great passer, which is just, he was he wanted to win the assist title that one year and really like was assist. Kind of like when Rondo was chasing assists on the Celtics the last 2 years. Yeah. The guy everybody said was a great passer back then was Russell. And Russell's like never mentioned any of these, but if you go back, like Russell averaged over 5 assists, at least one of those playoffs, and was a great outlet passer.
His outlet passing alone on those old clips is like
unbelievable outlet passer. And then also they used to put him kind of like how Denver uses Jokic at the top of the key, and they would run all these little zigzags and he would hit people and throw. So for whatever reason, he doesn't get mentioned. Jokic, I think the difference with him and these other guys is his ability to off the dribble to create plays. Like we've never seen centers do that before. It's kind of, I've never seen anybody like him. Walton was not like him. Walton was a great passer, but they were not alike as players at all.
And when the Jokic thing first starts happening too, you go like, who is this guy? And he looks like, and a lot of people are going to get this reference, but you ever remember being a little kid and like maybe it was you and your buddies, you're on little league baseball teams, so you were like the popular kids in recess, but there was that kid who had like a hand-me-down winter coat and he always had boogers in his nose and he was like bigger than everybody else and nobody really talked to him. And then his face was always like red and weird. And then like one of the cool kids like said something to him and started making fun of him. And then he just went berserker mode on you and beat you and all your friends up at recess. That's what Jokic looks like to me. Like that's right. When I see him, he's got like these weird like jogging things. He'll like kind of do this odd apology to a ref with his hands, his mouth. He'll be like, and then he's just killing everybody. And
he wouldn't pass he wouldn't pass my alien test. Like if you brought an alien to a basketball game, you're like, who do you think the best player is? They would not pick Jokic. Jokic would be like the 7th or 8th pick.
He's like an extra large Shamit face theory guy.
Well, so I did some research because he's over 25, 10, and 5 again in the playoffs this year. So heading into this game, he was 26, 10, and 5.5, but now he had so he's probably like 26, 11, and 5 now, something like that. Here are all the players who were 25, 10, and 5 with shooting 50% field goal. Jokic did it twice. Tim Duncan, Larry Bird in 84, Chamberlain in 67, Blake Griffin in 2015, underrated playoffs, Barkley in 86, 12 games there, Wilt Chamberlain 68, Magic in 80, Bill Walton in 77, and Lucas in 72. Those are all the guys 16 games or more. All of those guys are Hall of Famers except Blake. And at least 5 of those guys are top 10 all-time guys. This is not something over the course of a playoffs. You're not supposed to be 25, 10, and 5. He's 25, 12, and 7. And I know the stats are a little messed up because of the way basketball is being played now, but it's not like he's shooting threes. It's not like he's assisting. Like this is all flow of the game shit, and he's just dominant.
Yeah, I'm just going to double check it here again tonight too, because I don't know what the numbers are.
Wasn't he 16, 19, and 13, something like that?
16, 13 assists, 22 boards.
22 boards.
And he only took 6 free throws. I mean, he was 5 of 13. He missed every 3 that he took tonight. So if you just looked at this is one of those basketball reference games. You'd be like, oh, that was a weird game. Like, but he wasn't doing much. And you go, no. He was kind of doing. No. I can't say he was doing everything because it would discredit how incredible Murray was in that second quarter, which it just kind of changed everything. But I still kept waiting for that Clippers comeback. I kept waiting for it to happen. But this is like, I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm probably going to pick the Lakers, but I now look at Jokic and Murray as different. And this isn't, this becomes this battle of like, oh, these guys have always been this. Well, not really. Like, not really. And now they just did it again. They came back from 3-1 again. And when they were down 3-1 to Utah, I'm like, man, this Denver team, like, why do people on TV say, like, oh, look out, they're like this sneaky team that could come out of the West. And now it's real, and now it's a real possibility. So yeah, like, now I look at the Denver Nuggets differently because now they've done something. And what they did against this Clippers team, I still can't, like, I'm sitting here in disbelief that this actually just happened.
Well, let's talk about a key component: continuity. And we're in this league now where everybody just changes players constantly, and the stars switch teams and all this stuff. And the Clippers are a great example of that, right? These guys were thrown together. They played 2/3 of a season. We never were 100% comfortable with where they were as a possible contender. Pandemic happens, go back in the bubble, and the same thing, on-off switch. They look great one game, ease up the next game, whatever's going on. And Denver's a team that's kind of grown up together here. They added Grant's a new piece. Porter's relatively new, even though he trained with them last year. But the Jokic, Murray, Harris, Millsap, those guys have been playing together for a while.
Torrey Craig's been there for a bit.
Yeah. And I think this really helped the Celtics in that Raptors series too, where you had Smart and Jalen and Tatum. And those guys have been in wars now together for 3 straight years. Jalen and Smart have played together 4 years. I do think the continuity helps. And when you really notice it is when things are going south. And like this Clippers team in Game 6 and Game 7, where all of a sudden they look like a pickup basketball team. They don't have the history. And the first time I really noticed this as a phenomenon was the 08 Celtics. Because the 08 Celtics were awesome. What were they, like 66-16, 65-17 in the regular season. And then the playoffs came around and Atlanta was going at them. And it was like the continuity and the cohesiveness just wasn't there yet. They hadn't built it. They hadn't played with each other enough. And they barely got by Atlanta. They blew them out in Game 7. Same thing in the Cleveland series. Took them forever. They finally finished them off in 7. And they kind of built that continuity as the playoffs went along. And then it kind of clicked in the Detroit series, and then it took off. I don't think this Clippers team had a chance to do that. And I don't really know what their identity was, because I think to the bitter end, they didn't know who their best 5 guys were at the same time. They're still playing Lou Williams in this game. They're going down the ship with him. Lou Williams shouldn't have been playing at all in this series. The defensive stats on him were worse than the Harrell stats. Denver was hunting him way worse than Toronto was hunting Kemba in this series. And they didn't need his offense, but Doc just was like, oh, these are my guys. We'll figure it out. And then all of a sudden the game's over.
Well, it was hard to bet against it, though, even though that was something that was happening the whole time, right? Because we're watching them, we're going, when are they going to play together? I remember going on with Cowherd, and he was like, I think this is great by design because they're resting the guys. I'm like, dude, it's not by design. They would love to have 20 games with these guys. They would love to have 20 games in a row with all of their players and figure out what's happening. And then you come back, and Montrez isn't ready to go. Lou gets busted for going to Magic City. Pat Beverly's in and out of the lineup the whole time, and it's really tough. Like, they had a moment with Reggie Jackson where Reggie Jackson was playing some really good basketball for him, and then you'd say, you know what, I don't really want him out there closing. And then he had to go to him at some point. And then Shamet, he turns his ankle. But like, I thought, oh, hey, Shamet's back on the scene. He hadn't been able to hit any shots in the playoffs whatsoever. But it's like they didn't want to give up on him. But the Jokic numbers against Montrez were terrible. The second unit numbers were terrible in long stretches throughout this playoff season. They tried to mix it up, I think, late with Paul George getting in some more minutes with the second unit. But really what it comes down to is, like, when you max out and everybody in the world wants Paul George, like, and look, people are going to listen to me thinking I'm giving Kawhi a pass. I'm going to save you the time. I am. He had a bad game for a guy that's at legend status. This isn't his 10th Harden game, okay? This is somebody who carried a franchise by himself and absolutely diced up the Heat becoming a superstar, all right? And so since he has those on his resume, I'm going to look at him differently because I go, you know what? He's forcing the issue, but there's a bunch of those possessions in the fourth quarter, and I knew it. Marcus Morris, who may have screwed the whole series up by pushing Millsap, and Millsap being like, look, you want to be a fucking tough guy all the time? And look, Marcus Morris is a tough player, but he's not tough mentally. And Millsap's been around long enough. And then Millsap has that incredible run in that game. That's that comeback. And you're like, oh, now look, is it all because of that? That'd be overstating it a bit. But Morris got the ball and he didn't want it in the fourth quarter. And then he got stuck with it and he took a shot. I still can't believe Morris hit that corner 3 against Kleber in the Dallas series because I've seen him miss that shot his whole career. Reggie Jackson has a flailing attempt JaMychal Green goes to throw it down to give him some momentum. That thing ends up punted at half court. Then Paul George in the same possession has the ball, throws it out of bounds. Paul George dents the side of the backboard.
That was
those
a fun
corner
one.
threes. And you're just going, you guys are all toast. Like it was just like you. I don't like saying choking. I don't like questioning the manhood of these guys because deep down, like these guys have all had to go through a lot. But to have it be so obvious in front of your face in that fourth quarter, and you're like, not one of you guys is comfortable right now. And I think Kawhi's discomfort was, I can just drive in on 1 million people right now and throw it up at the hoop. But, nothing, we're done. Like, we're toast. We were watching a team walk to its own funeral.
We need a better word than choke. It's almost like gack. But you know it when you see it.
Did they look scared to you, Bill?
I thought we always say, oh, they look a little tight. I thought that the whole team had deer in the headlights. Once the Nuggets threw a couple haymakers and it was like 9 points, and every time I felt like the Clippers were going to have a run, the Nuggets would make a shot, and you could just kind of see it. It was that hot potato look. And Morris was a good example. Like, Morris got the ball a couple times. Morris, big tough guy from Philly, wanted no part of it. Reggie Jackson, they threw him out there. He was terrible in like the minute and a half he played. All these dudes. I never, just for the record, I was always on the record, I never was a huge fan of the Morris signing. I didn't like the moves they made at the deadline, and I didn't think they addressed their biggest issue, which is like, what happens if you're playing Jokic or Anthony Davis in a playoff series? What are you doing? Does a team really need Zubats that much? But
I don't know. There weren't a ton of things available. I mean, at least Morris in some version of it, like he's not unplayable. But I love one of those when he got stuck taking that first shot that he took in the fourth quarter, and I was like, he doesn't want it. He doesn't want it. And I don't know if everybody picks up on all that stuff, because then you start looking for it and you go, you shove Millsap when you're up, but now you don't even want to you don't even want the ball in your hand.
Well, some teams are like that though. Some teams are great when they're up 13. I thought Boston in the Toronto series, after the miracle shot in game 4, the whole team was tight. Did that mean they choked, or were they rattled from the game? I don't know, but you could see it. You could see collectively they were not playing freely. And I think one of the great things about this Denver team, they're so tested now with these comebacks. They first team ever to come back 3-1 two series in a row, much less in the same playoffs. And they just were never scared at any point. I wrote them off after game 1. When they got killed in that game like an idiot, I was like, oh, all right. This was a pretty limited team. It was 2 guys. They have too many holes. Their bench isn't good enough. The Clippers are gonna kill them. And they just kind of kept hanging around, waiting for this Clippers team to fold. We're going to take a break, and I want to talk about some of the great collapses in the history of the NBA playoffs. Okay. So when we're talking, we use the word collapse for the playoffs, and there's 2 kinds, right? You always see the stat about teams that blew a 3-1 lead in a series, stuff like that. To me, when you're talking about like really memorable collapses, it's got to be the team was either better and they blew it, or the team had the series by the balls and the series flipped, and all of a sudden they're standing there going, what the fuck happened? So you go back to the 60s. The 68 Sixers were the first team that blew a 3-1 lead to the Celtics and Bill Russell. That was when everybody thought the Celtics were dead. Sixers had beaten them the year before. And then the Celtics come back 3-1. They win a game 7. 69 Lakers, that was the West Baylor Chamberlain team. The Celtics are running on fumes. They end up pulling game 6 out of their ass, and then they win game 7 in LA. I think that was a collapse.
Was the game 6 one? It was that last second thing?
Which one?
Is game 6 of that series?
Sam Jones.
Yeah.
Right. Sam Jones. 79 Spurs.
Shout out to Sam Jones.
James Harden, his spiritual NBA godfather, George Gervin, who was the James Harden before James Harden. Spurs are up 3-1 in 79 over the Bullets and blow the last 3 games, and Gervin disappears in the last couple minutes of game 7. The 81 Sixers had a 3-1 lead over the Celtics. Celtics came back, one of the great series of all time. That to me wasn't, I never felt like that was a collapse. That was just like an incredible series, but I never felt like the Sixers choked. You watch those games and it's like, one of the great battles. It was just
that's one of the great series that's I would say, what, we're talking 40 years now. That
Yeah,
series never gets
post-merger.
Look, I don't know. You'd have to be from Philly or Boston to remember that series as well as you probably do. But that's one of the all-time. That was one of the first ones me growing up. I was more aware a year after that, being a little kid. But that series then going back and people kind of talking, like the mythology of that 81 series was probably the first series I remember at least being aware of basketball and sports where it was like what happened against Philly in that one. It's just considered one of the all-time greats.
And every game was 1 point, 2 points. You can watch on YouTube. The 84 Lakers really kicked that Celtics series away. The game 2 had the Henderson steal against Worthy. Game 4 had the comeback, the McHale clothesline, all that stuff. And after that series, you know, that started with the Tragic Johnson, Magic
Johnson,
a whole bunch
that was
of shit.
Cedric. Yeah.
87 Pistons, the Isaiah steals the ball. They blow it. They have the Celtics. That series is basically done. It's going back to Detroit. They have the lead. Bird steals the ball, flips it. They lose in 7. Your guy Barkley in 95 with the Suns. They blew the 3-1 lead to the Rockets.
Well, they blew a 2-0 lead to the Rockets the year before. So 94
right.
kills me, and 95 was just as bad. So I don't need to remind you.
Basically 2 years in a row where they folded when it mattered. The 2015 Clippers against the Rockets. I went to that game. 2016 Warriors.
That was actually sneaky. One of the weird Harden beginning of some of the anti-Harden stuff.
Well, he
was on the bench.
He got benched. Yeah, he got benched and had a towel over his head. I was there. 2016 Warriors against Cleveland. LeBron comes back. 2019 Rockets last year, where they blow a series where Durant's out. They get the break of breaks. And they still lose. And then this Clippers team. And I don't think I missed anything. I think that's 50
what about,
plus
did
years.
You have Oklahoma City when Golden State
the Clay game?
Yeah. Because they blew a 3-1 lead too.
Would you say that was a choke collapse, or would you say that was Clay just pulling their sphincters out? I guess it's a little of both.
Well, I would say it was a collapse if it looked different than Westbrook and other big spots, which was to say that it always looks bad for the most part. So
the reason I'm bringing all of these up, because they're all famous for whatever reason. We've never seen a team roll over in a game 7 like this. It was a rollover. It was a submission. It was not only are we losing, but we're actually giving up. And you're going to watch us on live television as we throw shots against the backboard, as we give up wide open threes, as we do dumb coaching decisions that we're just never going to change our dumb strategy that's not working, culminating in when Kawhi gets stripped. And I think their Nuggets are up 18 with like 2 minutes left, and Kawhi gets stripped, and he just stops. And everyone in the Clippers stops, and the Nuggets have a 3-on-0 fast break, and none of the Clippers are even running back. That's never happened in one of these collapse series. I'm just telling you. We've never seen a team visibly roll over like that, and they should be embarrassed.
Okay, I'm not going to say that the play like that has never happened because we've seen
no. I'm saying that whole quarter how they rolled over has never really happened in one of these situations before.
I'm trying not to do the recency thing here, but that was so. It was such a. I don't want to sit here and start, but I'm not in shock. Look, I'm in shock from the very beginning that Denver came back 3-1 again. Okay, it's never happened before. They did it again. And like I said, if you're that good, like how did you get down 3-1? How the hell did you get down 16 and then 19 and then you still kept coming back? And I think the Lakers have a little of this. They did it with Houston. They were so disrespectful of who Houston was that they were like, Houston, they would let Houston get back into some of those games. Like you'll never remember any of this stuff removed
for
from
sport.
But when you were watching it, it was like, holy shit, Rondo's hitting threes. All right, let's just stop caring. And they're like, wait a minute, like Houston just went on a 25-5 run. Like, what the hell are we doing? And I think the Clippers were very guilty of that. The difference is the Lakers were like, all right, enough of this shit. We're going to go ahead and win this game and win this series in 5. But it's probably, of at least recent memory, I would say it's one of the more disgusting efforts I've seen from a basketball team. And I don't know how you argue against that because it just was.
Well, for all the shit they talked about being, who they were, what they were going to accomplish, the confidence and the swagger they had, which they had rightfully because Kawhi's on the team. But when push came to shove in game 6 and game 7, they completely disappeared in both second halves in like a really memorable, borderline historic way. I cannot remember a team completely rolling over in 2-second halves like that when they're up 3-2 in a series. To my knowledge, it's never happened in an NBA series before by a good team. I'm sure it's happened by like the T-Mac Orlando, like those type of teams, but not by a team that was favored to win the title 3 weeks ago.
I'm with you, man. I can't believe it. I mean, look, Golden State 3-1 lead. First of all, Kyrie and LeBron turned into like all-world players for 3 straight games, and it was still a possession game.
And Draymond missed game.
Right.
Draymond missed game 5. Game 6, Cleveland was amazing, and game 7 was a dogfight. At least they fought the whole game, though.
Yeah, that's totally different. That's totally different. I'm just thinking, because I know what's going to happen is there's going to be some game that we're not thinking of because it's just hard to keep track of, I don't know, every single game. But that was, as I'm sitting, I rewind plays and go, oh my God, like this guy doesn't want anything to do with this. Like he's looking, like there was one play in particular where I forget who it was on the right side, but they were going to like set up the action on his side, and he just went, no, and started pointing frantically to start the action on the other side. And the other guy was like, this isn't what the play is. And then he's like going, so now I'm supposed to cut with no screen to the ball. Okay, cool. Now I have the ball. Like, what the hell am I supposed to do? And it was weird. It was just weird to watch a team completely unravel like that. And it wasn't like it was like you.
Do you think they were waiting for Kawhi? You think they were just waiting for Kawhi to be Kawhi, and he was just having a bad game, and he looked tired to me. And I don't mean I'm not going to make excuses for Kawhi, not everybody else. I'm just saying like Kawhi's built up this playoff resume that's almost unassailable, and he just looked like 2 steps slow. I mean, we think about 2 weeks ago, we were talking about how he seemed like he was at the peak of his powers.
Yeah, I think
and he couldn't even beat guys off the dribble today.
Defensively, there was some slippage with Kawhi, and you can tell with some of the defensive assignments there. And there's some other stuff. If you looked at some of the Dallas numbers in that series, you could make the argument that he actually wasn't this great defensive stopper. But I also think Doncic has a lot to do with that too. Where if Doncic just gets you even, and he goes into you, like it doesn't matter who the hell you are, he's just going to be bigger and finish over you. But I think Kawhi had 2. I'd have to look at it again, but I thought there were 2 stretches in the fourth quarter where he looked like, okay, fine. Like, I guess it's up to me. And then he missed every shot too.
Right.
And then once he missed every shot, then it's like, holy shit. It's like the toughest guy in your group getting beat up first as you're running across a field to fight like the rival town. And you're like, Danny just got knocked out. Like, maybe we go home.
And Paul George was really bad.
He's terrible.
He's really bad.
In another big elimination game, Paul George was absolutely terrible. And that's why I call him 30-13. 13 points would have been an improvement from what he did tonight. He had 10. And
did he get to 10?
He got to 10. I was hoping he was going to hit that last 3, so it actually would be 13, my 30-13 theory. But let's look at the shooting numbers here again.
I got to be honest. I was not surprised by the results of this game. I'm surprised the Nuggets won by 15. But when I was looking at the lines today, the Nuggets were plus 7.5. The Nuggets were plus 290 to win the game. I was alarmed by what I watched in game 6. I really was. I was alarmed because I thought there were real fundamental issues. It wasn't just like, oh, that was an off game. They just fell asleep at the switch. It was like, no, they have real matchup issues, and their coach doesn't seem to realize them. And we have to mention the Doc Rivers piece of this. He's now presided over, I think, more of these than probably any coach. Now, he's been coaching for a lot of years. He's been coaching for almost 2 decades, but he's just been on the wrong side of history in a lot of these. He's blown 3-2 leads 3 times, 2010, 2012, 2015. He lost game 7s at home in 05 and 09. He lost a game 7 to Utah in 2017, and then he blew a 3-1 in this series. And I don't know whether it's an adjustment thing, whether it's bad luck, whether he had the wrong guys on his team, but I do wonder, does he survive this? Who's the fall guy? Do the Clippers just run this back?
I just wanted to finish the line here for Paul George. 4-16, 2 of 11 for 3, 1 free throw attempt, 4 boards, 2 assists in 38 minutes.
So the one free throw attempt is he should be thinking about that all offseason. That's embarrassing. Get to the basket.
George has moments.
Put Jokic in foul trouble.
He has moments where he's like early Seth Curry with more rebounds.
Yeah.
And now I think Seth actually get to the hoop, so I'm not turning this into like a massive.
Yeah, sorry, Seth Curry.
Yeah, I'm a Seth Curry fan.
Seth Curry's like, what the fuck? I would have at least gone to the basket.
The Doc thing, I don't know what happens. And I don't know what happens because, look, we all know I like Doc. I think he's a really good coach. I think he's a really good coach for stars.
I think he's a really good coach
too. But you're right. The resume has some dings on it. And when you're favored and you lose to this Nuggets team after you're up 3-1, like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, like, no way, you're seeing it all wrong. He's like, he was $11 million a year. I was looking through what the extension was. The extension was like a year ago. So you got to think he's probably got like 2 more years on this deal.
I had an idea.
Trade him.
He's been traded before.
He has.
Philadelphia 76ers need a coach. Just throwing it out there.
For who?
I don't know. Get a future first for him. Promote Ty Lue.
Okay, but can I ask you a question?
Maybe you like this. No, you like this. See, this is pretty good.
But this is, give me a little like, I know I can go too long, but give me a little bit of time to explain this. There's a reason why, the same time as we were talking just a couple of weeks ago about Anthony Davis, and that in a million years, I would not bet money on Anthony Davis signing somewhere else, because I think he's a very impressionable personality. And I don't think you blast your way out of New Orleans with Clutch packing your bags for you and then say to Clutch, hey, you know what? Say they were to lose to the Denver Nuggets and Davis doesn't get enough shots and he starts getting beat up and he says, you know what? I don't like this. Let me experiment here. Let me see if I want to go. I actually want my own team now. Okay. I don't think any of that stuff would happen. But the reason why teams prepare for that and work out Clutch clients or do things to always be as if they are like, hey, we always have your back to the agency, because that's part of the front office job, is because the unexpected always happens in this league. And the unexpected could be not only the Doc part, but like, what if Paul George goes, I kind of like, I'm not really feeling this. Or Kawhi looks around and goes, not one of these guys are like Patrick Beverley. I can't sit there and say that guy's not a tough guy, because he at least plays tough. But what if Kawhi looked around and said, I'm not really feeling this right now? It's not like he hasn't blasted his way out of 2 other places. Now, again, Toronto, he just left because he could leave, but San Antonio, he was out of there. What factor is Doc in that decision? Because did they go there because they love that Doc takes care of their guys? And Doc absolutely takes care of his stars. That is like Doc 101 as a coach. So all of these things, I think, are valid points to bring up in how weird could this offseason actually get with the Clippers after what we just saw. But as my default normally is with this, is they usually just run this shit back, considering this was year 1 of this group.
Yeah. Is there a fall guy, or do you fall into the habit of, you know what? It was our first year together. We were all in a bubble. The bubble was really hard on all of us.
Magic City.
We played all year for home court advantage, and then we didn't have it. And we still feel like, year 2, we'll add another piece. We want to bring this back. With that said, if Philly calls and says, we'll give you Embiid for Paul George and Doc Rivers, what does Ballmer do? Oh, you like that one. The first ever 2 players in a coach trade.
It's not even. Are we drinking? Are we supposed to be drinking on this podcast tonight?
I should have had a beer. Why don't I have a beer right now?
I know.
Embiid.
We should have had a beer. We've never done that on the pod. 38 minutes in, cracking White Claws.
Oh, you like Embiid for Paul George and Doc. You have to take his whole contract.
I tell you, with the rumor mills and all the different stuff going on, I still think Embiid and Simmons get a chance next year with everybody there. But I don't know that Simmons is going to cry any tears about it.
Yeah.
And Paul George is as bad as he was tonight. If he's a free agent this year, he's a max player yesterday. He's a max player again yesterday. But like, that's why I get so frustrated arguing about some of these guys. And I think people kind of give up as I go, look, I don't just randomly watch a player one day and say, hey, that guy stinks. It's usually after a few years. And these elimination games for George, elimination games for Harden. But at the same time, like with Kawhi, as bad as he was, I'm not going to sit there and say, okay, all right, so I've got LeBron. All right, Giannis, you're going to knock him down a few pegs. All right now, top 3 players in the league are LeBron, Butler, and Tyler Hero. And then I now have Kawhi 4th.
Yeah, but something important did happen tonight, though. Kawhi lost his title. He didn't lose his NBA title. He lost the title as, if you could have a playoff guy for one series, who would it be? And mine was Kawhi until tonight.
So now it's LeBron again? Or Tyler Hero?
It might be Tyler Hero. You saw him again today. The guy's just, he's got buffalo balls, man.
He's upset. Like, he told a couple buddies on a text thread, he's like, I can't believe I didn't get one MVP vote.
The kid Tyler Hero. He's like, second team all rookie. Fuck this. I'm going to hit the
Second
biggest
team
three
all-
right as the Celtics are about to finish my team tonight. I'm going to hit a huge three. No, but I do think the Kawhi run, which was really the best thing the Clippers had going for them this year, is like, well, we have Kawhi. In a series, big game, Kawhi's the guy. Well, he lost. So I'm wondering if it could be Jokic. Jokic could grab the title here. I went back
for one playoff game. Come on, it's LeBron now. If it's not Kawhi, after
no,
I don't like doing this game to game.
It's no. It's vacant right now.
It's vacant title.
Whoever comes out of it this year has the title.
Or
so
LeBron
with
has
Jokic,
it right now.
But they've played the Lakers really well. They played them 4 times this year. Lakers won 3 of the 4 games. But the Nuggets killed them once, and then one game was OT. One of them was like a 1-point game. If you watched it, it was like both teams kind of had trouble stopping the other. I think their supporting cast is better. And the Jokic thing, like, all right, great. You have to play Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee more. Awesome. Jokic is going to torch those guys. And then the Jamal Murray thing, like who's going to guard Jamal Murray in the Lakers?
They'll figure it out. They'll figure that part of it
out.
Who
do you trust? Who's their best defensive guard?
Pope, probably.
Caruso?
I think there's some awesome Caruso numbers, but if Pope's hitting threes, you're going to go with Pope. Pope was getting some of the defensive assignment there.
Well, this brings me to my next piece of that Kawhi question.
Right.
This just fell so perfectly for LeBron. And I think we said this the last time we talked about this stuff. Like, gets the beaten up Portland team in round 1. Perfect.
Wait a minute, though. Everybody was saying, oh, this is bullshit. They get the 1 seed and now Portland's back and healthy.
But that team was a corpse.
Yeah, okay, but that's not what anybody was saying before
I know, but
game 1.
But now that we know what happened, that was a good time to catch that team. Second round, they get Houston. Westbrook, I am actually in the camp, like, it swung too far with people against Westbrook because...
Recently?
He had COVID. We know he had COVID. And he was hurt. And he came back, and I don't think he was even 80%. And I just don't think he's as terrible as he was in that Lakers series. Like, he was terrible. He's flat out terrible. I don't think he's that bad of a basketball player. But regardless,
I thought he was terrible in the game. He had 30. Like, he had 30 in
he was so
game
bad.
4, and I was like, this is so bad. That sounds like a Daryl Morey text you. Here's a question I want to ask. No. You're a scholar.
No, that was not a Daryl Morey text, but they had that Daniel House thing too. And now they're going to play the Clippers in round 3, and now it's the Nuggets. Like this, I'm just saying, like, this is great for the Lakers. The Lakers would have signed up for this.
The Lakers are going to beat Houston no matter what. And Daniel House is an important player to the rotation because it basically just eliminated 20 to 30 minutes out of that. But I don't like the PJ Tucker stuff towards the end, and I love PJ Tucker, but like he's looking around going, Are you fucking kidding me? Like this sucks. Okay, this sucks. I have a point, and I'm going to ask you as a scholar of the game.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever lost in the playoffs healthy? Because nobody. The rule is if you're the marquee guy, we just hear about how you're hurt like a day or two later.
Oh, it might even be like an hour later.
Yeah. Like
I feel like Toronto was like, hey, you guys got us. We didn't play that well. Congrats. There was no like, hey, Siakam had a sprained MCL. There was like nothing that came out after that series. No injury stuff. There's an example.
I'm not going to say anything nice about Toronto for a week.
It was a rough ending for them. Wait, I have one more Clippers thing for you.
And you're right, by the way, about Toronto. Because, nothing came of it.
Do you know this was the 50th Clippers season?
Yeah, I do. I wrote it down on my notes.
Dating back to the Braves. And they showed that graphic, and it's amazing, where they're like, franchises with the most years not making the conference finals. It was like Clippers, 49 years. Charlotte, 30 years. And then somebody else, 18 years. Amazing. That's
impossible.
Franchise, it's like we're now half a century.
It's the conference finals. It's not even winning a title. It's you can't get to like 2 steps removed from winning the whole thing. You can't get out of the second round for 50 years. That's impossible.
Do you know the Celtics have been in 9 conference finals since 2002? I had no idea. And I don't even feel it. You wouldn't be like, man, remember that unbelievable 20-year Celtic run? But my point is, it's not like that hard to make the conference finals. It's a little hard, but it's like Portland made it last year. To not have it happen once in 50 years,
The
It's
Celtics
incredible.
are in nine
Yeah.
since 02. So the Nets series, they were up in that 02 series too, weren't they?
02,
02,
08,
08,
2010,
10.
2012. Or maybe it was 7, not 9. It's 7. My bad.
No, eight is when they won the title, and then 9 they lost to Orlando because they were hurt because KG was hurt again. And then 10, obviously they played in it, and then 2 years ago.
So it's whatever.
I
But
don't know.
my
That
point
still
is
seems
that
high.
it's not like impossible to make the conference finals for them never to do it. But then you think of all the great players that they've had or the great draft picks they've had. You know, they've had just this decade. They had Chris Paul, they had Blake Griffin, they had Kawhi Leonard, they had Paul George. So
Jerome
that whole
Robinson.
thing, like, I know a few Clippers fans, and it was already a little weird because it was like, wow, the one year we have a real chance to win the title. None of the games are going to be here, and they're all in a fucking bubble in Orlando. But still, this is great. We have a chance, but it's a little weird. But now it's like, okay, we're halfway through Kawhi and Paul George before they can opt out in the summer of 2021.
Now we're talking.
We've given away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. We gave away Gallinari's expiring, and we gave away 130 first-round picks. And now it's all on next year. Now it's 2021 or bust. And one or both of these dudes could look at each other and be like, "Yeah, I don't want to play with you anymore either." And they're both gone. And there's nothing left other than this giant arena they're building in Inglewood. I mean, it is a fucking disaster.
We both know any front office would do it all over again tomorrow to get those two guys. But I mean, I really do think you have to. And again, I know
I agree.
I know that George would be maxed immediately, but I wonder if any teams ever actually have these conversations. You go, hey, if we could max George, would we not? Would we not after the 8th game where you're like, what the hell are you doing out there? And the answer would still be that you would probably max him. But I think it's all valid because it was that bad. It's not just disappointing. It's like horrifying where you go, whoa, like what just happened to us?
Well, the other thing that was amazing about it was these guys, we thought like Paul George and Kawhi together, this is going to be unbelievable. This would be, we wouldn't have seen this since Pippen and Jordan were together as perimeter defenders. They're just going to lock down everybody. It's going to be ridiculous. I just didn't think Paul George's defense was that good.
See, I thought he had moments against Murray where he was incredible and he was locked in. It was not tonight.
No, I'm just saying he consistently wasn't at the level he was a year ago. Like I thought Tatum today in that Miami game, even though Tatum fell apart offensively in the last 5 minutes and in overtime, I thought that was the best game I've ever seen him play defensively. Even that Butler 3-point play when Butler just threw it up, and I thought Tatum played really good D. It was an arguable foul call. He was just his hands were all over the place. His switches were perfect. He had either a couple steals or where he forced a steal because he was in the right spots, and just was a dominant two-way player for the first 43 minutes of that game before his offense went away. And George had moments like that last year in Oklahoma City. The first 4 months before he hurt his shoulder, he was a dominant two-way player where it's like, wow, this guy's one of the best 5 players in the league. We didn't see that this year. And I know he had flashes, but they were always just flashes.
Yeah, he had a weird slow start, and that was off of that horrible close to the playoff series 2 years ago with OKC. And then he had I remember watching, I don't know, the first week of OKC games because I was always watching him because I was like, am I wrong about these guys? Is it going to click? And he had kind of, I mean, I don't know what the game log says now because in the moment versus game log is always a little dangerous. But I remember just going, this guy, what the hell? And then he goes on this tear where he ends up being like an MVP type player.
Well, he reminds me of Jalen, where you'll be watching the game and you forget he's out there for 4 minutes. And I love Jalen, but like Jalen today.
Yeah, but no one's talking about building a team around Jaylen Brown.
And maybe we shouldn't be talking about Paul George either. We're going to take a break, and I have one more thing to do on this. Talk of Paul George really quickly. Is it conceivable that they actually do think about moving him? Because we know there's no loyalty either way these days, right? The players don't have loyalty to the teams. That's been established the last 5 years, and they shouldn't. And the teams have never had loyalty to the players. And it's like, hey, yeah, we're building this whole thing. But maybe if they make a move, maybe it's that.
Let me do some rapid fire ones. Would you do Paul George for Harden right now if you were the Clippers?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think you still would.
It's weird. Like, would you do Paul George for Bradley Beal? Washington wouldn't do that because George only has a year left on his deal.
Yeah, that's the problem. He has a year left in the deal, but that might be why the Clippers aren't looking for.
How about Simmons?
I don't think Philly's going to do that. I think Philly's afraid if they're going to split that up. I think they'd be more afraid of Embiid's long-term thing, and they don't want to end up trading Simmons and then keeping Embiid. And if Embiid, who his track record of staying, he's actually been healthier than I think I would have ever imagined. And maybe he doesn't get enough credit because he has the dings here and there, but I don't think it's obscene to suggest that everybody should be worried about him. Embiid's body's going to hold up because he needs to be getting thinner as he gets older. He needs to do the Duncan thing. And even though he's so young and Duncan got thin a lot later in his career, I just would like to see Embiid close some of these games where he looks like he's a little bit more in shape. And until you see that from him, although we get to hear about it all the time and then it never actually happens, I would think Philly would be. Do you agree? I mean, wouldn't you agree that Philly's probably a little bit more scared of, like, if we traded Simmons for somebody and we have Embiid, and then 2 years from now it's not any different health wise? Like, what do we have?
I'm on the record. I would not trade Simmons. Yeah. And I think over and over again we learn this. It's just been so long since we watch playoff games. I judge all my dudes by who's going to be there in like that Friday night game 7. You know who's there? Marcus Smart. God damn, is he frustrating? He takes, even today, they're up 10 early in the first quarter. He's hitting shots. And then he literally has 4 straight possessions in a row where he makes just the worst possible decision. You're like, God, he's so frustrating. But I fucking love that guy. I ride or die with Marcus Smart. And in a game 7, guess who I want on my team? Marcus Smart. Guess who's not rolling over in that Clippers Nuggets game tonight? Marcus Smart. Guess who wouldn't have lost? Guess who wouldn't have been on a team that lost by 15 in a game 7 when they were favored by 7 points? Marcus Smart. He would have gotten kicked out before he even witnessed it.
Totally agree. And I've not been the biggest Marcus guy over the years, especially when he was taking shots. He was shooting like in the 20s from 3, but now the shooting from 3 is definitely passable. There's still offensive decisions where I go, come on, man. It's like, how this early in the shot clock and you're next to Tatum and Jalen and Kemba. He even had an ISO where he got Bam one-on-one and took a long 2 over him. Did you see Jalen go up? Like, Jalen was going up like, this is an air ball. And Jalen's
it went in.
Rim. His head is like at the rim and it goes in. And Jalen Brown's like, whoa. Marcus Smart, the play he made in the corner on the Embiid pass where he was going opposite corner and he jumps out like a defensive back, jumping into the flat. Like, Marcus Smart just does stuff that's different. And I've struggled with him. The flopping with him drives me crazy because I just don't like it no matter what, who I'm rooting for. I just hate it because it's in the game. But you're right. But I don't think he's going to get. Would you trade Marcus Smart for Paul George?
No, but Marcus is untradeable for me.
Wait,
Marcus,
so that's a no from you.
No, Marcus is going to retire as a Celtic, and he's going to take Cedric Maxwell's job when Maxwell retires, and he's going to be in my life for the rest of my life until I die, and I'm signing up for it now. 16-year Celtic career, immediately becomes either the radio guy or the TV guy, and then another 40 years as that. He's never leaving Boston.
What if he opened a bar called Smarts and everybody called it Smarts?
Smarts?
I think that would work.
Can I just read you all of the Denver Nuggets playoff highlights in the history of mankind? So 2009, they're 2-2 against the Lakers in the Western Finals. Then the Lakers win the last 2. That was great.
Are you done?
1985 made the Western Finals, got killed by the Lakers. 1978. Not a lot of people having a lot of 1978 basketball conversations. Took Seattle to 6, and Seattle beat them in the 78 Western Finals. And then in the last ABA finals ever, they lost to Dr. J and the Nets. And those are all your great Denver Nuggets playoff highlights. They have never made the NBA finals. 78 was a really fun what if year for the league, because that's right as we're heading into the cocaine era and tape delays and people really turning on the league. And they came very close to having David Thompson versus Dr. J in the 1978 finals. And Philly ended up falling apart. Washington makes it. And then Denver loses to Seattle. But
that's the Dennis Johnson. That's the Seattle type of team.
Seattle Bullets, 2 straight years really hurt the league because those were not like, there's no stars to like market. But if you had Thompson and Irving. Anyway, star-crossed franchise, and this is about the best it's looked. I mean, if you were doing, I'm starting a franchise with ... who do you pick? The Jokic is no lower than third or fourth at this point, right? Stonkic, Giannis, Jokic might be the third pick.
I don't know. You do this sometimes.
No, don't give me the you do this.
Yeah, I am. Now Jokic is the third best player in the league, and you're starting your team with him?
I didn't say third best player in the league. I'm saying I am starting my franchise, and I could have anybody. Who am I taking?
You're taking him over Tatum right now.
I think it's a debate. I don't know what the answer is, but I think those are probably the next two picks after Luka, Giannis, and I think it's Tatum or Jokic for that 3 spot. I mean, Jokic is only 24 years old. It feels like he's older than that, but he's not. And Tatum, he's 2 years older than Tatum.
I thought Tatum was 19.
Murray is 22 years old. And it's funny because
this team's young.
I know. We always talk about like, oh man, what, this
Murray was a young qualifier. He was like young at Kentucky.
Right.
So,
well, it's like how Kobe was a rookie when he was 17. But we always talk about like these destinations for different free agents, and nobody ever mentions Denver. And meanwhile, that's probably the best situation, right? Not only do you get to play on an annual contender, but you play with a team where the ball actually moves. The guys like each other. You could play with a guy who actually makes you better. I have one more Paul George trade for you. Okay. Paul George for Porzingis.
Porzingis is a no, just because he's too big and has too many leg injuries.
He's not a hard no. You had a hard no the other day, and it became a headline and an aggregated.
Yeah, that was actually one of the few times we get aggregated where I'll get something sent to me. You'll send me some article, and I go, "Oh no, what now? What happened this week?" And that one was like, "Oh yeah, that's exactly what I said," and that's accurate. It was like a hard no.
Hard no. So Porzingis is just a hard no for you.
And I like Porzingis, but he's a leg problem. So I'll
if we ever get like Heineken or one of these beer companies to sponsor a beer for us, I think Hard No Lager would be a good one. Hard No. We have a segment like Russillo's Hard No of the Week where I throw a trade at you and you're like, no, hard no. Hard no. No, it's a soft no. It's a flaccid
I want to know which
time.
Celtic you would trade for Paul George. I think I'm more fascinated by this. It's no to Tatum. Would you trade Jaylen Brown for Paul George?
I don't want Paul George in my life that way.
What about Robert Williams?
How about all 3 of our picks and Robert Williams?
I think you hate the picks. Would you trade Romeo Langford for Paul George?
I'll say this. I like having the picks this year because I was looking at KOC's mock draft, and it seems like everybody's just all over the map with this draft. That Stanford kid KOC had him going 23rd. Terry?
Yeah, I like him.
I'm in on that kid.
Yeah.
And my guy Halliburton was 10th.
The school really likes the Stanford kid. The school really liked him. And the more you watch him, I mean, some of the Steph Curry stuff, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous when you do that. But he was a young kid who was taking big shots for that team. So
I like that guy. All right. Quickly before we move on from Clips Nuggets. Mike Malone. Fired by the Kings.
Yeah.
Just pulled off 2 back-to-back 3-1 upset victories. It was a weird firing when it happened, but I just like the fact that the Kings didn't even make the playoffs and somehow were losers in multiple ways, right? The Luka trade is the most iconic fuck up non-pick of the decade. We'll be making a documentary about how did Luka go to 3 and not even go to the team that actually had the 3rd pick. That'll be a documentary in 10 years. And then Mike Malone, who's the one good coach they probably had in the last 15 years, they got rid of him. And I think they've had 3 coaches since.
I was anti. No, I do. I'm going to give it to you here right now to be totally transparent. I was very anti Mike Malone for a long time, and it had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with every person that wrote for years that Boogie Cousins' career would have been different if it weren't for the fact that Mike Malone were let go. And I would be like, you think so? Really? You think Cousins would have just been a super team guy and locked in and boxed out and done all the stuff that you kind of need to do if you're going to be a winning team? You just think, because everybody kept writing this excuse article. Everybody's an exaggeration, but there were many people, multiple people that we know that kept writing about, well, he was Cousins felt so betrayed. So I ended up like going, Mike Malone, like, give me a break here on this one. And it wasn't fair to him. But whatever he did, whatever his deal is with a young group to get them to keep buying in his whole one game, all the cliche stuff that I don't like to give too much credit, because all of us know what you're supposed to say. I could be the coach of an NBA team down 3-1, and all my interviews would kick ass. I would know exactly what to say. But he got these guys to believe it. And he got these guys to believe it when they're down 7 at the start of the third quarter. And, I think, for anybody saying Kawhi's tired, Jamal Murray's playing a ton of minutes out there too, and then Jokic, he was ready to throw back out there. And then they had this nice run in the fourth quarter where Jokic is on the bench chewing his face off. And then he throws it back in there later. So, I think they're a little predictable with that 2-man stuff when it doesn't look right, but then it looks amazing against Utah when Murray's not missing any shots. And then tonight, if Denver can ever have the consistent guy that plays off of that 2-man game that's knocking down the shots, they are a completely different team. So as much as we're going to get on Doc's case for having a team collapse like this, getting a team to believe that's pretty young, that's never really done anything in the playoffs, they probably should have been in the Western Conference Finals last year. I'm kind of surprised they still lost that Portland game a year ago. That was one of those things that kind of stuck with me a little bit, where I'm like, how the hell did they lose that game? And they did.
Yeah, they're young.
But
the biggest thing that changed,
I'm a fan now, right?
I think if Harris played the whole Utah series, it would have ended sooner. And Harris had a really bad regular season, and I think he's been really good in the playoff bubble. Like, he played.
Oh, I don't think he was really good right away.
But he was really good in this series. He played 37 minutes tonight, hit a couple threes. They were plus 21 when he played, but his defense, I thought, was good. I thought they really missed that against Utah. And once, if you do that Utah series again where he can guard Mitchell a little more often, that was one thing. And then I do feel like they kind of went all in on Grant in this series, because they had all these different dudes, and it was like, sometimes this guy would play, sometimes this guy would play. And, Porter played 15 minutes tonight, which I think was smart.
Yeah, Porter was not a big part of this at all. Yeah.
They went with playoff guys. Millsap played 32. He's not, he's certainly not all-star Atlanta Paul Millsap, but knows where to go, knows what to do. He's tough. He's not going to back down. And they basically rode him and Grant, Jokic, Murray, Harris, and then, got a little out of the bench.
I always like Morris's minutes. I always like Morris's minutes. But yeah, the Porter, that's a good call, because we hadn't really mentioned him at all, because he hits that huge 3 earlier in the series, big part of the turnaround as well.
That was huge.
After he was catching all that shit. And let's face it, Porter's not a popular guy, although I did think it was interesting that a young guy complaining about work wasn't supported more. But he hits that shot. He hits that shot. And, it was kind of funny. It's all just results based, because it's like, who are you to do that? And you shouldn't do it publicly. But yet Porter hits that shot. Reggie Miller's like, good for him. Right. So he's thinking, this is awesome. And, he backed it up a little bit, even though he said something that he shouldn't have said. And then for him to not be a big part of this, though, was surprised, because you're thinking, if Denver's going to win a game 7, some third guy has to go off. I think that's the thing with Denver. This is the thing you look at with the Lakers. And the Lakers are probably going to stick to a lot of the same rules. Hey, Grant, you got to beat us first. All right, Gary Harris, we're going to beat you. You got to beat us first. But I think Anthony Davis is a completely different deal than Zubac and Harrell closing defensively against Jokic. They'll probably not ask Anthony Davis to chase him around from the tip all the way through, but I would be shocked if Davis is not closing on Jokic.
They might cancel each other out, and then the problem for the Nuggets is LeBron is so consistent, which is crazy with the amount of years he's been in the league. But if you're in a 7-game series with them, he's going to be there in a big way in probably 4 or 5 of those games. And with Murray, it's maybe 2, maybe 3.
This is where
hopefully.
The LeBron. People don't talk enough about LeBron's steadiness. But hey,
LeBron, the Mark Jackson on me.
LeBron had some shooting games in that Houston series. Remember that first half where he had like 20 something, and he was hitting he was doing that deal where he was like, not just heat check, but he was like, what can I get to go in tonight?
Yeah. Can I make this 29 footer?
Oh shit, I can. All right. I'm going to go to the left side and try this now. So I almost think that gets lost a little bit.
Did you see the clip of all the times LeBron blocked Westbrook? He had 4 like crazy video game blocks on Westbrook. He clearly just kind of Westbrook bothers him, I think. That one year Westbrook won the MVP, LeBron probably just kind of tucked it away in his things to get pissed off about file, and was really kind of taking it to Westbrook. And then when they had that moment with Rondo and they're going back and forth and Westbrook's like, better not double. They're down 29 in a clinching game. He's talking shit. And LeBron's just laughing at him. It was embarrassing. That was a tough series for Westbrook.
By the way, the other part of that series is that Rondo turned into like Klay Thompson.
I know.
And you go, okay, look, if you're the Rockets, you're going, all right, this is hard enough. And now you've played a couple games. So now you've figured out that we don't really do a ton. Okay.
Right.
So it's easier for you guys to figure this out. And I still think Oklahoma City must go back and look at the tape of those games and go, why did we not attack the perimeter guys more? Like, what the hell were we doing? Why were we getting stuck all the time offensively? And then when you saw LeBron, and look, LeBron's different than Chris Paul and certainly Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, but Rondo just killing you from three. If you're the other staff, you just go, oh, so like, what are we out of here in 3 games? This sucks.
I think Paul George would make a great Rocket. I don't know how we can make that happen. I don't think the salaries can work.
I could see Paul George getting traded to the Rockets and then he and Harden at the intro guaranteeing a title.
I'm proud of us for one thing. We talked in the bubble about we weren't sure home court was going to matter. And we felt like with this every other day stuff might advantage the young teams. Even to see when they showed Miami was a 5 seed and the Celtics were a 3 seed, and that was the first time the top 2 seeds hadn't made the Eastern Finals since 1999, or maybe it was even
I thought it was 84.
84, whatever it was. I do think it's just weird. 2012 was weird. It had weird outcomes. OKC made the finals. We didn't expect that to happen. Boston and Philly played in a round 2. We didn't expect to see Philly in the final 8. And I think that the possibility, we have to consider it, of a Denver Miami Heat finals, it has to be considered and acknowledged. It just does. Miami is a better team than Boston. I don't know if that means they're going to win, but they have a better 1 through 9. I was really worried about this series. I know we're going to talk about it in a second. I could not believe Boston was favored. I was stunned. Talked to Sal about it on Sunday night. He thought I was reverse jinxing. I was not. But, Denver could absolutely beat the Lakers. I don't know if I would bet it, but Katie, wouldn't that be the perfect outcome in the bubble, is a Denver Nuggets Miami Heat playoff series 4th rounder?
Well, I'm glad you brought it up. No, because I was going to ask you at some point, be like, how weird is that going to be? How weird is that going to feel? And you can take more credit because you shouldn't give me really any credit, but this is something that I've just gone in circles on the entire time, where leading up to the bubble, it's like, hey, we're going to expect all these weird different things and weird outcomes. Okay, maybe, but we could still have Lakers. We didn't get Milwaukee, but even though Milwaukee had this incredible point differential, when people were kind of off in Milwaukee and loving teams like Boston, I was like, well, look, Boston hasn't really played together a ton, but I think Boston defensively, when you look at even what they did today against Miami and then what they did against Toronto, I think they have a defensive gear that's really, really special. But if they were going to have to play against Anthony Davis in the finals, I'm sorry, I'm just not picking the Celtics against Anthony Davis. I'm just not going to, because I've seen what a really good big can do against a short front line. And so I kind of still defer to why would the bubble all of a sudden have outcomes where lesser teams were all of a sudden better and the better teams were lesser versions of themselves. But I think it speaks more to the individual teams, where you and I for years now have had this thing about Milwaukee where we go, what are they really as a playoff team? The other thing you and I have talked about now for 2 years is the difference between regular season and postseason basketball. If you're a 3-point barrage machine and you think that's just going to completely mimic itself in the playoffs and get the same outcome, I think we're learning more and more with this new version of basketball the last few years that that's not really a guarantee. It's actually more unlikely that you're just going to be able to duplicate your success with that kind of style where you just play 5 out and take a million threes. How many more teams do we have to see that are sort of disappointing? So is it the bubble, or is it that an unproven Milwaukee came up short again? Is it the bubble?
We saw it with the Clippers tonight, 9 for 35 from 3.
Right. Is the bubble the reason? Yeah, granted, the Clippers would have had home court, but Denver probably evens the series at 2-2 because they would have been playing up in Denver. And if it's the bubble, then why are the Lakers just rolling through everybody right now? So I don't know that we have the answer, but if it's Denver, Miami, it's only going to be because of the bubble. It'll only be, which is unfair to those teams. But that's the way it'll be played up, is that, it was this really weird deal, and that's the only reason we got it. When it's like, well, wait a minute. There was no Golden State, okay? There was no Chicago Bulls. There wasn't even a Lakers with Kobe or the Celtics with those 3-year run. There was nothing that was established enough this year as a group that should have scared us off, that, we may have had a very unlikely outcome in a normal circumstance.
Every year has some sort of weird variable. This year was the bubble. And some teams figured it out and some teams didn't. And the teams that I think Milwaukee is a team that really could have used a crowd. And that was why you played the whole season. I think it would have helped them. I don't know if it would have been enough because I really do think Miami was just a worst case scenario team for them to play. And I think we would have had the same result. Maybe Miami wins in 6 and they get an awesome crowd in game 6 and whatever. But it definitely, wasn't ideal for Miami. I think same thing with Denver in this Lakers series. If they're playing the Lakers in the Western Finals in games 3 and 4 in Denver, it's hard to play in Denver. Teams have trouble there. They have a great home record no matter who's on their team. So the bubbles even some of that stuff out. But what I like is it strips out all the shit. And a lot of these games have just come down to who has more people who are going to show up for a big moment. That Toronto was a great example. Toronto had so much respect for that team. They didn't even play that well. Lowry was the only guy who really shot well out of their best 3. Van Vliet was under 40% for the series. Like Siakam was a disaster. But that team was so mentally tough, they just would not go away. They're fucking Michael Myers. You have to chop their head off to get rid of them.
We should do when it's all said and done, or maybe, up into the finals if we have an off day or however the schedule works out. But we should do like a reassessment list of who are the 5 to 7 players that we may have to reassess after these playoffs. But then the excuse will always be the bubble. We'll get back to the bubble. But Pascal Siakam is one of the first guys I can think of because he was so bad in that Celtics series. And I haven't heard if he's hurt or not yet. But his story is incredible. When you watched him in college and you're like, he's kind of this big athletic guy, but is he super quick, twitchy, and it's a little robotic. But then his story is unbelievable. He gets the money. He was on a tear at the beginning of this year. When you watch him, you can see that he is, if he doesn't already know where his feet are going ahead of time, a lot of that stuff isn't natural. And once you figure that out with him as a defender, he'll turn into the wrong side of the defense. Like when he would go to post, whatever, like the end of his combination of moves that he was throwing at you, he would actually turn into the worst option. Like unless it were boom, boom, 2 dribble, okay, I'm bigger and I'm more athletic, I'm going to finish. The Siakam part of that series, like I end up with that series going, for all the stuff about Toronto and, they didn't get enough credit. Like, wake the fuck up. You lost maybe the best player in the world. It's not complicated. It's not personal. Don't take it personally. You lost Kawhi Leonard. That's why people were off you. And by the way, everybody was wrong, including me, about what they would be this year. But when it was all said and done and they lose in 7 to Boston, they weren't as good as Boston. I think they got the right amount of respect. I think the people that mattered gave them the right amount of respect. But
certainly
them losing
for me,
in the second round to Boston wasn't a huge shock because they were struggling in those games. And then you'd look up and be like, it's a 4-point game again? Like how
they were Michael Myers.
Right.
Yeah, the Siakam thing, Jaylen Brown just figured him out.
Figured him out.
And then it was like the whole team. And then they were like, this guy does these 3 things. Yeah. And then when he couldn't hit threes, he was in his own head and that was it. But, I think it's weird. I think it's weird for these guys and I get it. They've been there for over 2 months now. They're running into guys they're playing against in elevators and on campus and all these things. And it's a different vibe and people handle that differently. And for the guys who like the younger guys like Tatum and Jaylen Brown, those kind of guys, like you can see like Tatum like loves this. Tatum today, I'm telling you that those first 3.5 quarters, that was some of the best basketball I've ever seen him play. And he was really carrying himself like, I'm ready to take over the league. And then I think all the energy he was exerting on the other end and chasing all their dudes, and all of a sudden all of his shots were short, lost his confidence. And that's why he's not there yet, but he's going to get there. I really do think he has a chance to be like really, truly a special forward, and you think like the great forwards of the last, 25 years, like Durant hit a point, and I don't know if he's going to be as good as Durant got to. I think Durant, as you know, I think he's one of the 15 best players ever. He's certainly one of the greatest offensive players ever. But Durant hit that point in like 2011, 12.
You mean my neighbor, Kevin Durant?
It started with the Turkey World Championships when you're like, oh, so this is actually really going to happen now. And then then there was baby steps and it took us 2012 and you could see the MVP coming. And it feels like that's happening for Tatum in these playoffs where it's like, if you told me Tatum's going to win the MVP someday, I'd be like, yeah, I could see it. He's hitting all the check marks you would hit if that's going to be the logical ascent to where this ends up. Like he's hit every checkpoint so far. is my point. Guys, foot-long season is at Subway. They make it easy to make a good call on food. So here's a little segment we're going to call Bad Call, Good Call, Russillo. We'll look at some of the good and bad plays. Let's go from tonight. Give me an example of a bad call in one of the two games. Not referee call, a bad call by a team or a player that we saw tonight.
So not refs. I didn't love the Celtics offense to close regulation and in overtime. It was, as much as we're going to give love to the big picture of Tatum, I was incredibly frustrated that they looked like the 12 seed that can't believe they're about to knock off the 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, and then they just freak out and take terrible shots to close the game and then lose.
Great example. Bad call. The clogged toilet offense that the Celtics ran. Another bad call. Kyle and I, we watched football on Sunday with my son, and we got
wasted.
We got wings from a place.
Wings.
we getting wings kind of moved because it was football. We should have gotten Subway, but we ended up getting wings, and I got the spicy hot wings, and I was feeling it for the next 24 hours. Not exactly my greatest decision. This week, Kyle, we're gonna make a good call instead. Like a sweet onion chicken teriyaki sandwich from Subway. Yeah, another good call. Getting a free footlong when you buy 2 at participating Subway restaurants. So let's make some good calls this week. Order and pay contact-free in the Subway app for quick and easy pickup or delivery on game day or any day. It's footlong season at Subway. Eat fresh, freshly prepared in front of you.
Did you know Subway? By the way, though, did you know Subway originated the take? Because everybody says takes, hot takes, the whole thing.
Fresh take, yeah. It was Subway Fresh Take Hotline.
Subway Fresh Take Hotline.
Yeah.
Yeah. They originated the OGs of the take.
One of the great ad campaigns. The clogged toilet offense that the Celtics ran. This has happened to them a couple of times in the playoffs.
It has.
And I know when it's happening. Yep. And I start yelling at the TV because the whole reason they're beating Miami in game 1, and they should have won this game, and it's probably going to come back to haunt them, let's be honest. They're playing with pace. They're using their athletes. They're pushing the ball when they can. They're not going slow. It's not turning into a slow half-court game. And then all of a sudden, they're 40 feet from the basket with 8 seconds left on the shot clock, just kind of dribbling. And it wasn't just the last minute. This was probably 8 or 9 plays in regulation OT where it's just like they're killing clock. Like they have like an 8-point lead. They're running like the 4 corners. And I thought it was just bizarre, and I thought it cost them the game.
Yeah, there was one Kemba one in particular where he just dribbled it the whole time. And then you're like, look, even if you get the angle, the help guy's going to be bigger than you. And at that point, with the help, with how long you took to drive.
Yeah, there's 4 seconds left, Kemba. What's happening?
Right. Yeah, that's what I can't stand with some of these clocks is where you go, all right, fine, I get that. I'm not even talking about like the last second where I don't want to leave anything left on the clock. You're talking, hey, there's still 140 left and you're up a possession. And the whole reason you like the Celtics team is they've got 4 guys that can make a basket. And then when you decide, hey, I want you 3 guys to watch. And, I think it happened more probably going back 15 years. I don't know. It's not like I keep track of blitzing opposing point guards, but I felt like that was every defense's like first movement where they'd blitz, they'd bring the big, they'd keep it with the point guard. And that's why teams are always scared off of small point guards. There's still teams that are scared off of it. And I'll see times where you blitz Kemba and he's still good enough to get around you and turn the corner. And now you're talking about 4-on-3 or maybe even 5-on-3 if he still has the ball. And there's a couple times they swung it and they made some good decisions. But for as much as I love Tatum, he had it going on in the Toronto thing a little bit, and the final numbers are great. Maybe it's because we have such high expectations for Tatum because everything you said about who he could possibly be, I'm with you. I don't have a ceiling for him, and it's so complete now. And some of the passing he's making and the defensive assignments where like Brad actually likes him better than anybody out there defensively when he has Jalen and Marcus as teammates.
He guarded Butler on the big play of the game. I thought Smart was going to guard him, and he picked Tatum.
But I can't help but think the Celtics won a game that, it could have gone either way. Miami's the better basketball team of the two, but to just let yourselves take yourself out of your offense like that and not even ask Miami to defend anything, that's not what I'd expect from Brad Stevens and the Celtics. And Tatum did it too many times to close this game.
We'll talk about Kemba in a second. The difference between the reason Miami won this game and Boston lost comes down to 2 plays for me. Tatum at the end of regulation, playing for the last shot. And it was almost, you could hear, it was like he was channeling Kobe.
It was very Kobe-esque.
Classic, terrible Kobe hero ball possession that it goes in once, but they never show the YouTube clip of the 20 times when it didn't go in. Ends up with just a terrible step back. He knew it wasn't going in when he shot it because he's running in for the rebound. And it's just like, dude, you're an incredible athlete. You can get to the basket anytime you want. Get to the basket. Try to draw a foul. Get some contact. Get in the air. Maybe we get offensive rebound, whatever. Go to the basket. So now we go into overtime. Butler, same situation, right? I think they're down 1. Takes Tatum off the dribble, goes into him, and he's just like, I'm getting a foul, and the ball's gonna hit the rim, and I might get a 3-point play, but I'm deciding this myself. I'm not doing some garbage step back thing. Not that when Tatum does it, it's garbage. It's just like, I just want my guys going to the basket. So when he got blocked at the end by Bam, which was an incredible block.
One of the greatest blocks I've ever seen of all time.
I love that. I'll defend that 100 times out of 100 with Tatum. Should he have dunked it? I don't know. Could he have tried to do a finger roll or try to get contact?
All the things you can get on Tatum for, it's not getting rejected by Bam.
No,
right.
I'm saying like,
I'm.
Could you have said like, could you try to bang off him and try to get contact? I don't know.
Nah, who cares? You try to throw it down. Bam made one of the greatest defensive plays I've ever seen in a playoff game. So I'm not having.
I'll tell you this. I've been watching the Celtics for how many years? I've never seen anybody block
80?
that Tatum dunk. Have you? Has that happened before?
Remember when he almost got LeBron? Oh no, he did get LeBron in 18. Remember he got LeBron in 18, and LeBron got to laugh about it because they won in Game 7, so it didn't really matter. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that Bam play, I don't feel like it is recency bias to say it's one of the most amazing blocks I've ever seen in a basketball game. With everything.
Well, how much strength do you have to your arms behind you as somebody's tomahawking it? Like the odds are, I think more likely you separate your shoulder because your shoulder is getting pulled backwards out of your body, but somehow. He blocked it. Anyway,
the dribble into traffic 180 turnarounds where he goes off of one leg. You're like, what are you doing, Tatum? Are you trying to make this even harder? And by the way, you're right. The Butler drive, because he had hit that 3 before when you probably at that point thought the Celtics were going to win the game. And Butler had been pretty quiet. I think 12 points going into the fourth quarter. He hits that 3 in the corner. And you're like, here we go. Jimmy time. Because really, I think the scary part for the Celtics long term in this is that even though we both agree Miami's better, you go, okay, but they don't have the big, as great as Bam is, they don't have the big to exploit him. They don't have the good big. Because Gasol's a bad big. And that's why I think Nick Nurse struggled with how many Gasol minutes. He wanted to play him more because he was big. Because even though Ibaka was the better player, he's like, now I'm playing right into the Boston thing by being small with them, and I'm not exploiting their front line.
You should have played Ibaka more, though.
Well, yeah, I would agree with that. But I think I can understand what he was trying to do. And where Miami, you'll go, well, wait a minute, they can't really exploit that part of it. But when Butler hit that insane and one layup, there's also a play off to the side where Dragic and Jay Crowder are arguing about who's supposed to set the screen, and Butler just says, fuck it, I'm going. Like, if you look back at that play, Butler's like, whatever, you guys, like, out of the way, done. And that's what I think every Philly fan watches and misses. It's like, you know what? Like, Butler, we've done it before. We don't need to do it all again. What's his standing as we update these things by the minute? But to know that you have somebody, after we just watched a Clippers team where it looked like every single guy was afraid for 12 minutes, Jimmy's just at least never going to be afraid, even if he's not one of the top overall guys every single year. And it was a little bit of like, Tatum's the best player in this series. Tatum's going to be the best player in this series. This is going to be awesome. That's not the way it closed, because Tatum made a million mistakes and Jimmy made 2 huge plays.
And it's even worse than that. I'm glad you compared the Clippers to them. The Heat have so many bad motherfuckers in this series. Bam, Warrior. Dragic, not afraid of anybody. Jay Crowder.
Dragic had his first submachine gun at 9 years old.
Crowder, maybe could dip into the Marcus Morris in this Clipper game tonight side, but I think is more the guy that we saw today, where you want him out there in crunch time. He's going to fight, and he's going to make plays. And then
Crowder's always got the toughest assignment too. Crowder was the gun.
Yeah,
he was the one guarding Giannis, not Bam.
And he's played in. Crowder's been in big games. Like, they made the 2017 Eastern Finals that year when he got concussed by Jair. And then Hero is the least afraid of anybody in the league. I mean, the fucking balls that he has. That 3 he took near the end of regulation was like, it wasn't even a play. It was just like he was open for a split second. He's like, fuck it. And it was a huge 3. If you missed it, you would have been like, what? It was like a Marcus Smart terrible 3, but it went in. And I don't know. This team just has a lot of swagger to it. I think it's going to be a really hard team to beat. I felt that way before the series. I think the fact that the Celtics over and over again in these games, they're up 10, they're up 12, not just Miami, but the whole playoffs. They're up 15, they're up 13, but they don't have a bench. And at some point, you either have to play the starters too many minutes or the bench is going to let up a little bit. And all of a sudden, it's a 2-point game again. And you saw it again today. And the other thing with the Heat, they made how many threes? They were 16 for 36, 44% from three in this game. I wouldn't say they're red hot. That's kind of who they are. They're going to be between 38 and 44% game to game. They're going to hit between 15 and 23. So they're never going to go away. You're not blowing them out.
No, and even when Boston got up, I don't know why. I don't know how many times people are going to watch games where a team goes up 15 and the other team comes back. Like it actually happens. That's normal where they come back. So even when Boston was up early and Marcus Smart hitting a bunch of shots early, you're like, okay, this is weird because there's going to be some late one coming. We're like, but he's just going to take them, and you have to accept.
Well, it's
the rest
theory.
Of it's amazing. What?
No, the theory when Marcus hits a few in the first quarter, it's actually you get worried.
Yeah,
because then he starts feeling.
Yeah.
Well, then
McCarty
it's like, he's like, no, I got this, guys. I'd rather he missed early and then hit some late.
But here, let me give you some more numbers on the threes, though. I'm sorry, but like Kemba,
go ahead.
In his last 5 games, 1 of 6, 1 of 6, 1 of 6, 1 of 7, 1 of 9. When it's against Toronto, where Toronto's entire defense was set up to screw you up, and you're watching it going like that was hard. It was really hard for Kemba to get free on that box one against Toronto. It worked on stopping Kemba. It did not work to the point where you won enough games to win the series. But then you're looking at this Miami part of it, and you're going, okay, it isn't box of one. Like you have your free looks to come off that high screen, dribble into your three. Kemba is not a catch and shoot three. I don't know what the numbers are. It just doesn't look comfortable at all. He's so much more comfortable dribbling into the 3-point attempt. Those shots are there for him again. And now this is 5 straight games. The guy can't hit any of these shots. And I think he's moving all right. So I don't know what the deal is here.
I'm on a lot of Kemba text threads right now.
How's Dr. Bill doing on it?
He doesn't understand what happened to Kemba. There's 3 types of text threads. One, is he hurt? And they're not telling us, and it doesn't look like he's hurt. And then 2, it's like, what the fuck happened to Kemba? Because this guy was awesome during the season. Like he not only is like a 40+ 3-point shooter, but he can beat people off the dribble, and he has like these 3 spots, a little like Chris Paul. He has like his little spot on the right free throw line. He's got his little pretends he's driving, then does the step back 12-footer, and then he's got like a 20. So he has these shots that he just consistently hits, and I've never really seen him miss them consistently. And now none of them are going in, and trying to figure out what happened to this guy. And I really think it's as simple as this. This is Dr. Psychologist Bill Simmons. Not my dad, myself. My theory.
Licensed.
He hasn't been in a big game since March Madness, UConn, 9 years ago. And I think he wants this so badly. And this is, it's almost, I wouldn't say it's like when you say somebody's choking. It's almost like he wants it too much, and he's thrown himself out of his game. Because some of the stuff he's doing is stuff that I've never seen him do before. Like he's passed one time today, he passed up an open 3 so he could pass to Marcus Smart for a contested 3. And it's like, you would just never do that in January. You would have just taken that every time. And then some of the stuff when he's driving to the basket, it's like his handle's off, and it just seems like he's pressing to me.
I definitely think he's pressing. So I would say it's more that, because I just don't like when a guy's out there running around for 40 minutes. We're all supposed to just think a guy's hurt because he has some injury history from before, even though I think all of us think that, watch it closely, that there could be a lingering thing there with Kemba, but not enough to use it as an excuse that you can't hit a shot now for 5 straight games. But his drives into traffic, not without much of a plan. And, you're always going to be the smallest guy there, and you're not some high flying guy, especially at this point in your career. But like the last 5 years, he's been 38, 37, 39% from 3. He's a really good 3-point shooter, a guy that could be the number one option when he had no help. Like the numbers he was putting up with that Charlotte team, where it wasn't like there was another guy, it wasn't like he was doing some absolutely gross shot attempt thing to get his numbers. He's a really good player. So this is alarming that it's gone on for this long. And the last 3 games, he is 13 for 46. That's game 6, game 7, game 1 today. And I liked some of the stuff they were doing late in the game. They were just doing a 2-man game with Tatum and Kemba, trying to figure out like, okay, well, if we get the switch here that we like, how do you want to attack it? But then it's like, okay, like at least with Jokic and Murray in the 2-man game, even though it's predictable, there's different options off of it when it's right. And look, again, I'll admit there's times that I didn't always like it. With Kemba and Tatum, it was just, okay, we got to switch. All right, who wants to do an ISO? I do. Oh, all right. I'll get the next one. I couldn't believe how bad it was at the end of that game. But Miami was tougher. They were tougher than them at the end. And by the way, the game shouldn't even have gone to overtime because Smart flops, gets that bullshit call before the inbound. They take the free throw. And it's just such a horrible look. It's such a bad look in that spot because you only made the call because you fell down. I'm going to ask people, and I know softball stats, Holy Cross, 2-on-2 games, house, shout out to the whole Worcester crew. But how many times do you fall down and pick up games? Is the answer 0? The answer is probably 0 when everybody was pretty good. Like maybe somebody falls in a layup attempt. Maybe somebody could fall down. Guys don't fall down this much normally in a basketball game. And now everybody falls down. The greatest athletes on the planet are falling down left and right. And it's like flopping isn't as bad in the game, but some of the off the ball flopping that gets called now. And I just don't understand. Like, I think the league needs to really revamp this or actually make it harsher to go, unless you saw someone absolutely get crushed on something, let's default to they probably flopped, because most guys this strong wouldn't be falling down for 2.5 hours.
Well, the Kemba thing today, I actually liked a lot of the shots he got.
I did too.
I'm throwing away the end of the game, but it certainly, he had a lot more freedom than he did in the Toronto series. And I also like the fact that defensively, they could hide him on a couple different guys. Like there were times when he was just guarding Crowder because it was like, well, if
Crowder's
you're
only
going to try
taking
to
a 3. Yeah.
It's like if you're going to post Kemba up with Crowder, like, please go ahead, knock yourself out. That would be great. Or Iguodala, same thing. Please post them up. So I think this is a better series for them. The Dragic thing is a problem, obviously. I think those are the type of guards, and I said this on Sunday night, those are the type of guards that have just killed these Celtics teams over the last couple of years. It's the one type of guy that Marcus isn't great at guarding. I think they did a really nice job on Butler. You know, he hits that 3 in the corner, that huge 3 he hit, I think either in OT or regulation, whatever. But
that was regulation, the one in the right corner.
He was
kind
of like a broken play.
No, and it was a broken play, and he stepped up as the defense went behind him. But he was a non-factor. You're right about Dragic carried them when it was weird, and then they had that amazing second quarter.
And then Hero hit that one big 3.
Yeah, late. But Dragic early was, I thought, really important to kind of keeping them in it.
But what worries me the most is, I mean, Wanamaker was pretty good today. That was about as good of a Wanamaker game as you're going to get. Yeah, he was, and they actually brought him in for defense at the end, which I don't remember them going defense with Kemba like that in a big game. But they can't play Robert Williams against Olynyk because all Miami's going to do is they're going to hunt him and sneak Olynyk off and shoot threes, and then they'll have to take Williams out. Grant Williams is going to have to play, which means Miami's going to leave him open. And then other than that, it's like Ojale and stuff like that. My point is, everyone's like, well, Hayward's coming back this series. Okay, well, if Hayward, let's say he comes back for game 2, he plays 20 minutes. We're not getting like peak Gordon Hayward. Like we've seen him come back from injuries. He's always tentative. He's going to be rusty. Even if he plays out of it, that's not going to be till game 5, game 6. And I just think the Celtics are in trouble because this team, the dirty secret of that Toronto series was Toronto wasn't very good. Like, go look at the stats. Go look at their shooting stuff. Like Van Vliet and even Lowry didn't shoot that well. Ibaka was the only guy who like really shot well for them in that series. It was just they were so tough and they were so well coached and they knew every trick in the book and they were able to drag that series to 7. Meanwhile, Boston won 6 of the 7 games, basically. It's not going to work against this Miami team. Miami is really talented. I think they're the most talented team left. I would have said that before the Clippers lost.
I don't know that I can say most talented when I still think like they're 1 and 2 in the drop off from where the Clippers were and the Lakers. I mean, that's what are we arguing here? I'm saying they don't have one top 10 guy. They don't have one top 10 guy. The Lakers have 2 top 5.
I like their 1 through 9 more than any other team, including the Clippers, who are now gone.
No, I know what the argument is because then you go 1 through 9. That's why I think the LeBron promo where it's like we're built different, man. We're like, well, yeah.
Well, he's right.
3 through 8.
Well, would you rather have a great 1 and 2 and then a bunch of?
I'd rather have a great 1 and 2.
You would?
Yeah. I think history tells us you'd rather have a great 1 and 2. But the difference between Miami's depth is that they're going to be able to do different stuff. They just are.
I'm going to say
Because-
this right now. Cue it up, Kyle. Get the record button ready. If Miami plays this Lakers team, if Miami gets by Boston and the Lakers get by Denver, I think it is a 2004 finals scenario in the making for an upset. I think it's a terrible matchup for the Lakers.
Wow. So you're talking Pistons, figure them out, and then every game you're expecting the Lakers to figure it out. Boom.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, they got it. And then it's going to be like this Clippers Nuggets series where it's like, oh, the series is over.
Yeah, the difference is that the Lakers won't be coming off of a bunch of titles in a row where they're sort of over it because they're not as hungry.
It's a good point.
And that's also something that I think is kind of funny. You think of the irony of some of the discussions around Kawhi, where it's like, what do we do with this guy if he goes to 3 different franchises and wins a title? Like, that's never been done. This is crazy. Like, what do you do? And my argument was, as impressive as that is, the difference is that the great players of all the other generations wouldn't have jumped to 3 teams in 3 years and put them in position. They would have won a title. They would have stayed. And a lot of these guys stayed for the prime of their careers. And we have this odd deal here. But LeBron is actually close to doing the thing we were ready to start applauding Kawhi for doing, which we didn't really talk about.
I thought on Sunday night, I thought Miami should be favored in the series. And I thought they were going to win the series unless Tatum went up a level. So I still feel like that's in play. And I know that's kind of a cop-out. It's like, we'll just pick the series. It's like, that's my pick. I think Miami's going to win the series unless Tatum vaults up a level, a little like Durant in 2012 in that Spurs series, and just everything that happened where Durant went up a level, and then it was like, this guy's the best player in the series. They're going to win. That's what has to happen for Boston. There's a scenario where Kemba shakes out of this slump and starts hitting shots again and might go back to being a 25 points a game guy, but I can't bank on it anymore. He just hasn't been good, really in the bubble like that, other than a couple Philly games. And I'm not counting on it anymore.
Nope. Miami's a better basketball team. And if Boston had gotten this one, who knows? It's still not impossible. The Miami thing, that's like they roll through Milwaukee, but I mean, it still feels weird that if they'd played, I think, an 82-game schedule, and I threw that number out to you, they would have been a 49-win team.
I know, but the thing is, the Crowder Iggy trade, that changed their team.
I don't think Iggy
they got
does much
Hero.
by the way, I don't think Iggy does much for him at all.
No, but I just think it rounds them out and it gives them a flexibility they didn't have before. And the Hero just got better as the year went along, was the other piece. All right, quickly, couple more things and then we'll go, because I want to get this podcast up. Most fun D'Antoni team for you. Where do you want him to go?
Ooh, okay. Well, we've heard the Philly thing for a while.
I really hope Philly doesn't happen. Please, no.
No, I don't know that it makes a ton of sense for him, because it's just not built that way, unless it's a check. Unless he looks at it one more time and says, hey, this is the check and I'm ready to go. It's probably New Orleans.
Yeah, that's how I feel. This would be the best thing to happen to Lonzo, right? Here are the car keys, Lonzo. I'm showing you Steve Nash and James Harden videotapes all summer. I'm going to spread the floor for you, do some Lonzo stuff. Now, whether he's that type of player, I don't know, but he's just been great with point guards. I mean, he got Jeremy Lin to look like an all-star for 4 weeks. So if Lonzo can be redeemed, and KOC did a good job talking about this the other day on his podcast about Lonzo went south. It wasn't just a shooting. It was like, this guy on the Lakers looked like he had a chance to be a semi-special defensive player and doesn't play defense anymore in New Orleans. So I don't know if D'Antoni is the one who's going to be tapping into that, but I agree with you. I think him with Zion would be really fun.
The important thing is Lonzo looked so bad on the restart that I want to forget it happened and give him a clean slate, that he goes into a normal season looking like the player that looked like he was going to, he's gone from, I kind of like this. I like these in-between things he does and not everybody else understands. He was really good defensively. He's a smart defensive player in the concepts. And then you're like, oh, this guy's going to be a bust. He stinks. He's passive. He can't shoot. You don't even guard him. And then this year, in the normal phase of the season, there were really some good things that you were watching. The shot was better. He had to be somebody you at least had to close out on and respect enough. And yet the defensive part of it, I mean, God, it was so bad watching him come back. I'm just going to pretend it didn't happen and do like clean slate Lonzo thing.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. Because at least the restart was too short. So let's see.
Does Lonzo have Shamet face in your opinion?
No, because he went 2. You can't have Shamet face and go 2.
Does Gary Harris have Shamet face?
He went pretty high, though.
Okay. Just checking. Would you trade? Here's my next thing for you. Would you trade Drew Holiday for the number 2 pick, Andrew Wiggins, and the Minnesota top 3 protected pick next year?
I got 3 more years of Wiggins, though, right?
Yeah.
I probably...
Drew Holiday's like 31 now.
I probably would.
I think I would too. And I think I would if I'm Golden State. I could go
Maybe.
Curry, Clay, Drew Holiday, Draymond, and free agent whoever.
Jacob Evans. That one. I mean, Wiggins immediately scares me off every time I hear the name. But
okay,
I know. Look, maybe I'm an insane person, but do I kind of want to hear? By the way, Jacob Evans finishing with Minnesota. Just want to double check that for the huge Jacob Evans fans out there. Am I nuts for wanting to kind of see what Wiggins looks like with the rest of those guys?
That would be where I landed as well. If I were them, I would trade back and try to get somebody to fit. And they have like a $17 million trade exception. I would trade back from 2 to like 9, 10, 11 range to some team that's hot to trot for like to get somebody second and try to steal some like Jeremy Grant type, whoever that version is
right.
this year.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
And you go back and you get like the 8th pick and you get that guy, you put him in the trade exception. I think that's a better move. I would want the draft pick because of the fixed cost. And I like some of the guys in this draft.
Yeah, that's where I think the New Orleans thing would be interesting because I'd have to look at their salary sheet. I'm not going to pull it up right now, but would the 2 picks save you enough that if Zion stays healthy in your building, so you get like a second reset with Zion to bring in somebody around him? But also with Golden State and how the salaries, I mean, the 4 guys in those salaries are so nuts that if you're moving Wiggins out, you still are so high up salary wise that it'd be amazing to get a couple picks just for that cost effectiveness of it. And you would figure, at the very least, you get a rotation guy, but maybe not this year. Who knows? Not a good team.
Next thing for you. Fertitta calls you.
Or Fertitta.
Fertitta?
Yeah. Either one.
However you pronounce his name, he calls. And he's like, hey, I'm just been calling around people I respect. I'm a huge fan of the podcast. What would you do if you were me? Would you run this back with this team and a different coach? Would you try to get it big? What would you do?
I go, hey, does James want to play with Russ again, or can you trade Russ? And by the way, trying to trade Russ now is
I think it's
the
impossible.
Worst possible. Like if you'd maybe been able to trade him, well, you wouldn't want to trade him. I think Harden still likes Russ. I got to know what's important to Harden. I go, okay, hey, the new coach comes in. He doesn't want to let you dribble the ball between your legs for 40% of the game. Do you want to keep doing that?
Yeah. Still interested in that?
Do we need to do this another year to see that it doesn't work? Like, what are you looking for, James? And I don't even know what kind of answer you get from James Harden. He'd probably be like, oh, I'm built different. I'm a problem. I would blow this whole thing up. I can't imagine owning the team and having to watch this and then sign all the checks. So I would, as talented as Harden is, I would not want to run. Now, I don't know if with his money situation, everybody keeps writing about how he's not liquid and with everything going on and all the hotels and all that kind of stuff. Does he need to just be competitive so it could trick all the Rockets fans into thinking like, hey, man, who's been on fire this February is Harden. We went 12-3 in our last 15. I think we could really do it this year. Is that enough that, and again, who knows what normal is? Is that enough? Like, what would you do? All right, let's turn it around. He calls you. What would you do? Hey, Bill, I want to make you GM. Go.
I think because you have no other choice, you talk yourself into how the team looked in February and what that could look like outside the bubble with fans and
health. I can tell you how it's going to look.
No. I'm not saying it's right, but I think it's like a relationship where you break up with somebody and then you get back together and then maybe like, maybe she won't cheat on me with other guys again. And you just talk yourself into whatever reality you want. I think
maybe she only does meth on the weekend.
Right. I think the reality of this team is that their window was 2018 and 2019. And then the other thing was they traded.
They deserve
Chris Paul.
credit for 18. They deserve a ton of credit.
They came
for 18.
damn close. Yeah. But the other thing I think that fucked them was they traded Chris Paul, not realizing that he was about to go to this plant-based diet that completely changed his career. Like go Google Chris Paul plant-based diet. He basically went a time machine back to 2014 athletically, and that's why he looked so good this year. He had a chip on his shoulder too. But I think if they had known that was going to happen, the smarter move is just to keep Chris Paul and those 2 extra first-round picks and the contract that ended a year earlier than Russ. I think they thought they were selling high on Chris Paul because his career was about to go in the poo-poo. And they didn't realize that he was about to have this kind of rejuvenation. Don't make a face.
Paul's been hurt. Paul's been hurt. Okay, so I'm not. But Paul's argument was, hey, I'm still beating guys off the dribble, folks. Okay, like all of you that want me in a retirement home here, I'm still taking people off the dribble. The problem is Harden doesn't move. Okay, off the ball, Harden doesn't do anything, and you can say that it spaces everything, but like the defenders know in big spots, once James isn't in the play, he's not in the play. Now I don't have to pay attention to him. That was Paul's beef, but I also think because Paul's like this high IQ basketball guy, he'd be pissed at Harden all the time, and Harden's like, "This is my team. I'm sick of this shit. I get along with Russ better anyway," and so Harden goes to goes to ownership and says, "I want to play with Russ." So I think that's your biggest problem. Even if you want to try the Harden thing again, the guy's incredibly productive. We know this. He's healthy. He's going to hold up, I think, for a really long time. But I'd want to know, like, hey, do you want to keep playing the style? Okay, you do. Well, the Russ part, like, I know those 2 months were incredible when we opened it all up, but like, do we want to just be incredible in February or March, or do we want to have a real shot at this? Because having a real shot at this, the way we were constructed right now, we probably don't have a great chance. And that's the biggest, like the Covington thing's great. I love PJ Tucker, Eric Gordon, look, up and down, but for where he is on this team as the 3rd, sometimes 4th guy, it's not that big of a deal. But I would have to know where Harden's head's at with the whole thing, because just to run it back with Russ and him, which is probably what happens, because I think trading for Russ is really, really hard. The only teams I ever hear about Russ, this is what happens. I think I've shared this with you before, but a team that would sit around and be like, we're stale, we haven't done shit, we're totally off the radar for 5-something years. Do we just throw a bunch of pieces at Russ and say, all right, we've got a superstar, and I'm using air quotes for superstar with Russ. Do we just do it to shake it all up and be different and have a cool attraction? And then you're like, wait, he's $44 million and he's hurt? No.
It's a move that, do that in the 70s and 80s in the NBA, like Russ would have been traded 2 more times. It's like how George McGinnis, where Philly's like, hey, man, any interest in George McGinnis? And Denver's like, yeah, that guy's great. Here's Bobby Jones. And then they give Bobby Jones the best defensive forward in the league straight up for George McGinnis, because back then, like, people barely knew how to run a team. And we still have that with certain teams. Like, a team like Sacramento go, hey, Russ, I mean, he won the MVP 3 years ago. Could he sell tickets for us? Put him with De'Aaron Fox. It'd be pretty explosive.
That's
Buddy
how
Hield
it
for Russ. Like, we're getting the better player. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, Russ is on your team. And Russ has moved again. And it's like, wait, I thought you and James Harden were so close. James like, yeah, Buddy Hield, spot up shooter. My guess is they'll run it back, new coach, blame stuff on the bubble and the fact that, Russ was banged up.
Well, they'll blame somebody. They'll definitely blame somebody. Those articles are coming because there's very little accountability with that organization.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, look, the referee report against Golden State 2 years ago, I still think is one of the more embarrassing things. It was a joke.
Is Tom Brady washed up?
How about Arians going, yeah, I don't know what the hell his problem is. He looked like Tom Brady practice. I don't know what that was all about. We're like, whoa, not used to that. Here's something I want to tell you, because I was actually listening to Mason and Ireland out here on 710, big fan of the show, and they were doing the Brady segment where it was, what does this mean? I almost called in because you should have. I can't believe, like, in what world would we have 20 years of evidence that Brady's the fucking man and that Belichick's the best to ever do it, and that somehow that's still all in the balance with a few weeks here in his 20th season at season 43? That would be like watching Braveheart and watching William Wallace, the whole movie, going, all right, whoa, all right, okay, all right. And then he gets his guts, spoiler alert, guts taken out at the end. And then somebody in the theater turns next to you and goes, we're not that tough after all, huh? Wasn't that tough? Like, what are you talking about? Like, we already have we have all of this evidence that they're both incredible. I resist, and I think less of the argument that somehow that this is something that's undecided.
It's a zero-sum game.
Yeah,
there's
like
one winner and one loser.
We're still not sure who's actually any good in this. So that's not a bad rumor. It's just a bad segment. I almost called in.
Yeah, I saw your tweet was like, what was it? Belichick 1, Brady 0.
Yeah, it's the updated Bill and Tom power rankings. I had Bill 1 this week, Tom 2, but we'll see how next week plays out.
Sal and I talked about it on Sunday, and I don't feel like this is an overreaction. Brady's lost his ability to improvise, and I think it's a really important quality for the quarterback position. When something unexpected happens, or when you have to go to plan C on a play.
You really already there. Because I think based off of last year too.
I felt that way last year. Okay. I felt what I saw in this game was a continuation of last year, where he's become like a stage actor who has to have the lines exactly how he memorized them, and then the other actors have to say their lines exactly, and he's used to it. But if somebody ad libs on him, he kind of doesn't know how to roll with it anymore. That's what I see when I watch him. I think he knows what he's doing for 2.5 seconds when the ball is snapped. And if anything goes wrong, he either throws it away, doesn't want to get hit, and he's not ready to experiment. He just doesn't want to do it anymore. That's what I see. As somebody who's watched him now for 2 decades of my life, he used to have this supernatural ability to move around and create an extra second and a half. Just kind of move around without being like a scrambler like Josh Allen.
No, his mobility in the pocket's the best I've ever seen. Mobility in the pocket. He's not a mobile quarterback, but his mobility, which is, I think, far more important than getting out.
He doesn't move like that anymore. He just doesn't. And I think these teams now are going they're just sending dudes at him because they're like, if we can get to him, if we can start hitting him, he's gonna not be able to do his thing. He's just not. Now, he did get like 100 yards in pass interference on top of his stats. So I think his stats were a little deceiving, but I thought he had like 5 or 6 like really terrible plays that I don't think you can chalk up to, he doesn't know his teammates yet. That wasn't what I saw. I saw a guy who was 43 who didn't really want to get hit.
I thought the Evans throw where it was the first pick, I could see how that could be on Evans. But again, this is 20 years of thinking it was never his fault on any interception.
I know.
That's how good he was. Because you could usually go back and look at every interception in those peak Brady 15 years and you go, yeah, all right, actually, you could see what happened here and why that went wrong. I don't know whose fault that was. The throw to the right looked like it just took a long time to get the ball over there. And that's the throw where people will tell you, like, when it goes, that's the throw you can't really make anymore. And it was funny watching Drew Lock.
That's what happened to Manning.
Yeah, well, Manning's, it was over. He was having to throw pop-ups to get the ball down the field, and because he was throwing it higher in the air, it was easier to recover if you were the defender on the route. But
it's not that bad. He's not as bad as Manning was. I wouldn't compare that in a million years.
No.
Yeah,
good. I'm glad we got that out of the way because it's about to go there anyway. But, Drew Lock for Denver, like, he had a throw to the sideline that was sick in that game against Tennessee. And I was like, oh, that's right, because Brady's looked so bad. I'm going to go ahead and wait because I think Brady's a huge, well, we know this. I don't need to say I think, so I should stop saying that. We know that Brady is a big rep guy. There's no way he got the reps he thought he was going to get. I don't know why you wouldn't defer to Brady. That's what Elway did. The great Peyton Manning story when he was in his free agent tour and he goes to Harbaugh and he and Harbaugh are playing catch and Harbaugh's actually like, losing a little something on the ball. And Harbaugh was like, he's like, what are we going to run? And Harbaugh's like, you're going to run what I'm going to run. We're going to run my stuff. And then he goes to Elway. Elway's like, well, you run whatever you want. I don't know why you'd bring Brady in and tell him he can't run his stuff that he's comfortable with. So I got to see more of him looking bad before I'm ready to write this off. Although the accuracy numbers last year, there was a lot that weren't very good.
How about this? He's 43 years old.
You know that stat about the 7 games?
Yeah.
You know that stat? That stat, and I'll repeat it one more time. 7 games have been started by a quarterback 43 or older in history.
This was never going to end well. And there's going to be a season where it just is a rough season and then it's going to end. And it was Brett Favre in 2010. It was Manning in that last season when they won the Super Bowl. They barely did it, but it was jarring because I was with Kyle. We're watching the Arizona-San Francisco game on one TV and then Bucs Saints.
How about Kyler, huh? How about his run?
Well, you're watching Kyler and then you're watching Brady and it's like, if a Cardinals play went wrong, Kyler's just like, all right, cool. I'm going to run for 11 yards.
And by the way, he had like 13 runs. Kyler had 13 runs, and he either ran out of bounds, slid, or scored on 12 of the 13. He only got hit one time.
He just dominated it. And you watch Brady, who it's like if the play didn't go perfectly the first 2 seconds, it was either he's throwing it away or he's getting hit or God only knows. And it's like, all right, it's hard to say he's the GOAT anymore, even though he's the GOAT.
I'm not ready to say that it's like you sound like you're ready to just write this
I'm pretty bummed.
Like it's 8-8.
I was rooting for him. I really bet on them. I wanted to root for him, and it was a bummer.
Is this like when older buddies show up, alums come back to school, and they're like 25, and they get shit-faced with you, and they sleep on your couch, and they wake up at your house, and you look at them, and you're like, oh my God, guy looks so old. You never had a alum sleep at your house?
No,
we had a couple, and we were like horrified. We're like, what the hell is that? What's going to happen to us?
I was thinking last 2 years, Bird. When it's like, he looks like Larry Bird. He could still put up 20. He'd have a couple awesome games.
I'm blown away.
It's like I knew it was different. I just didn't want to admit it.
Yeah. I'm shocked you used the Celtics as a comp. That was amazing.
He loves Scotty Miller. I'll tell you, Joe, he loves Scotty Miller. He really loves this guy. Loves him. We're going to hear that all year. Russillo, thanks for staying up late on a Tuesday night to commemorate the clipocalypse of 2020. Trademark.
There you go. TM.
All right. You have a podcast coming Thursday. I do as well. We'll see you then. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.